What is going on, everybody? My name's LeakyTapsMan, and this is another video in my wishlist series where I bring you a list of features and ideas which I would like to see in the next iteration of an established franchise. This week I'm going for Left 4 Dead, and more specifically Left 4 Dead 3. Now, all joking aside about Valve not being able to count to 3, seeing as they've done it with Half-Life and Portal and now Left 4 Dead, I think we all know that eventually this series will be picked up again. It's too damn good just to leave it in its current state, I feel. So whether it's in the near future or a few years down the line, we can expect a Left 4 Dead 3 in my opinion. And the following additions and tweaks, I feel, would make the game even better than what it already is, and it already is pretty fantastic. So, without delaying any further, one thing I would love to see back in Left 4 Dead 3 that seemed to be missing from Left 4 Dead 2 was the creepy vibe and atmosphere that the original incorporated. This came through a myriad of factors, most notably the music. I felt it wasn't quite the same with the whole southern vibe that the second one gave off. And don't get me wrong, I very much enjoyed the atmosphere of the second, but I felt that the darker tone of the original gave it that bit more involvement for the user. There was that bigger sense of not necessarily playing a horror game, but playing a game that was more tense. To build further upon the atmosphere, I think adding proper weather effects would be superb to see. Low visibility in certain areas of the game definitely add to the tension. They make you more on edge, which these kind of games I always feel you should be. And if Valve were to create a weather system akin to the zombie director mode where it's a bit more random than your average game, then it could definitely make for a more memorable experience in my opinion. So on top of the atmosphere, another thing I'd like to see is a larger variety of locations. Now I personally think that America's been explored enough, and the third game, feasibly it could start in America and then have the 4 survivors escape to Europe, and obviously give us a greater variety of places to visit. Obviously Europe has the likes of London, Paris, Munich, Rome, all fantastic cities to set the game in, gives them a wealth of options to work with, and they could also change their weapon set accordingly to each level, because another thing I felt was kind of lacking in the first 2 games was the weapon variety, so mixing it up as you change from level to level would be a great thing to see, I think. Now with the mission length, I personally think that 4 campaigns isn't nearly enough. Even with the replayability factor, which Left 4 Dead has great replayability, I think that 4 campaigns doesn't offer enough variety. I know they add more through DLC, but the on-disc campaigns should be more plentiful. And especially when you consider that basically there is no separate single player, then that's just not good enough in my opinion, especially when you consider the pedigree of the developer. And also, whilst on the topic of a kind of lack of single player, I'm not saying make a total separate single player campaign, but what I would like to see is if we are playing the game in single player, then we get some proper cutscenes to actually go a bit more into the story. Nothing Metal Gear Solid style where it's OTT, but just tie the levels together a bit better, give us some more continuity, and let players delve into the story more if they so wish. I know a lot of storytelling in these games kind of come through the discovery of certain points in the environment, which is great, but I just think a little bit beyond that would serve as a good bonus for those that opt to play this game in single player. Okay, more onto the gameplay elements now. One addition I would like to see in Left 4 Dead 3 is a proper XP system with upgrades. Now, I'm not saying make the game like Dead Island or Borderlands where you're properly leveling up and you do more damage based on your level. I'm just saying, say after killing a certain amount of enemies you get a skill point to assign, or you can purchase upgrades for certain weapons depending on how much you've used that particular weapon. So say you could get extended mags, or a laser sight, or a scope. And even cosmetic things, so like hats, I know Valve love their hats, extra costumes, just little things like that that give the user incentive to keep on playing. And under the assumption that some kind of XP system does get introduced, then I think dynamic challenges within the missions would be a cool thing to see. So these would be challenges that are kind of thrown at you on the go, so I don't know, say set 10 infected on fire at once could be like a group challenge, and say if you do that you gain a bonus 1000 experience. That's just one example, but you see where I'm going with this, just a bit extra to mix up the gameplay each time you play it. Okay, as for the characters themselves, I know a lot of people are kind of clamouring to make their own characters, but personally, I don't think that's a good route to go down. I would personally like to see the Midnight Riders be the survivors in the third game. These were the rock band in the second game. I mean, you've got 4 of them, they obviously have good chemistry together, so hopefully they can have a bit more verbal interaction than just saying reloading half the time. A real pet peeve of mine. So seeing those guys as the survivors would be my first choice personally. I would also like to see more special infected types in the third Left 4 Dead game. So again, throw up new gameplay elements, make us adapt, so give us maybe a flying type. I would personally like to see the Screamer come into the game. This was an infected type that was intended for the original, and it was meant to be passive like the Witch until you kind of aggravated it, and then it would scream to bring in other infected to come and get you, which I think is a really, really cool type. But Valve deemed it to make the game too difficult. Well, maybe throw in an extra difficulty level on top of hard and have that infected as an option. Beyond that, a couple of brief suggestions. I think this one's more or less a given, but I'll say it anyway. The game should use this new Source engine that's rumoured to be in development, not 100% confirmed. As much as I love the Source engine, I think it's starting to show its age quite a bit now, and that was quite evident in the second game, at least on the 360. And while speaking of the 360, this one is more down to Microsoft than Valve themselves, but I would love to see something akin to the Steam Workshop where we can play with user-generated content on top of the main game. But like I say, this is more Microsoft's decision. I know they're quite strict with allowing this kind of stuff on their consoles, but it's something that just adds so much longevity to the game, and I'd love to see it on consoles personally. And finally, let us see our legs again when we look down. I really don't get why they took that out. Okay, so that is more or less everything I would like to see in the follow-up to Left 4 Dead. As always, I'd love to hear your opinions and suggestions. Just tell me what you'd like to see in the third game. If possible, I would rather you not direct hatred towards myself. It's just my opinion. So a big thank you for watching. If you could like the video, that would mean a lot. And if you like this video, I have a wishlist series where I do this kind of thing for a variety of different games. So be sure to check that out. Thank you again for watching. Goodbye.